Hello, everyone, and welcome to another gorgeous episode of the Clutch Cast. I am joined by my lovely coworkers today, Evan and Chris. Tell me a little bit about what you two do at Clutch.
Yeah, we're excited for this podcast. I'm the videographer here, so I'm the guy behind the camera wearing the easy rig on set.
What's up, guys? I'm Chris. I'm a photographer here, and I'm also behind the camera, but I do a little bit of different things than Evan, and I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we are so excited to have you, and obviously I'm Maddie, associate producer extraordinaire. So listen, today's topic, in light of the recent Oscars, all eyes are on cinematography lately. So let's talk a little bit about our favorite moments this year in visuals and some big wins that we have seen in filmmaking. So first of all, I want Evan to clear up for everyone watching and myself, to be honest, what exactly a cinematographer is, what they do.
Yeah, so cinematographer obviously is the person behind the camera, but not everyone might know that they're also the person involved for making the creative decisions when it comes to lighting, which plays a huge part because without light, you can't see anything. So, so that's basically it. Just camera, lighting, and movement. That's another big part of it, is deciding how the camera wants to move in a scene and how the story you're trying to tell. You know, it's their job to kind of like filter the story and translate that into a visual language and deciding what that visual language is.
Right,
So.
That is not an easy job. Let's check out this year's winner, first of all. Let's see my man. Bring him up, please.
Hoyt van Hoytema.
Look at him.
How do you pronounce the name again?
Hoyte van Hoytema.
That.
Yeah, and I know Chris was a huge fan of Oppenheimer, which he won for. So Chris, tell me what you loved so much about Oppenheimer's cinematography.
One thing I kind of like to think about after watching a movie is how to make me feel. And walking out of Oppenheimer, I definitely felt, I don't know, I couldn't really describe the feeling. It's something I never really felt before. But the movie just felt so gigantic in a way of visual storytelling that just, it showed me that movies are still alive, well alive today. And it was just definitely an experience to watch that movie for sure.
Yeah, why don't you tell them a little bit more about the experience? Where did we see it? Who saw
So
it?
we actually took a trip, a little work trip, down to up to Fort Lauderdale, and it was a 70 millimeter IMAX movie theater, which apparently there's only like what 30, 25 in the world.
It was something like in the 20s, but
Yeah,
in
and
America,
then maybe 11 in America.
Yeah.
And we so happened to have one in Fort Lauderdale, so we definitely took that opportunity and we watched this movie how it should have been watched, and that was a crazy experience. I think the screen was about 5 stories high or something like that, and I've never seen a movie like that, and that was definitely an amazing time.
yeah, it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity.
sure.
That was crazy.
Yeah, this is one of course, the most famous scenes, the Trinity scene, where they're testing the bomb for the first time.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely nuts to see on a, 5-story screen.
Yeah.
I really, truly, and the sound in there, and being around a ton of other film dweebs was a major viewing experience. Well, you just saw the big explosion, right? So let's talk about that.
Spoiler warning.
Spoiler alert,
There's an
it
explosion.
explodes. Yeah, exactly. So Nolan's very famous claim to fame for this movie is that there was 0 CGI. And Chris is of the school that there was no CGI. He said no CGI.
I mean, I choose not to believe that Christopher Nolan lied to my face, but I know Evan has something to say about it.
Well, you know, that's part of the juiciness of marketing a film, is saying there's no CGI. But
Lying? Crazy.
But, you know, I think that kind of takes away like the really important work that VFX teams do, and there's a lot of cleanup work that happens behind the scenes that people don't even notice because the whole point of their job is to be unnoticeable, you know?
Right.
So how much was it? I think there was like 200 VFX shots in
Which
the
is
movie.
very little.
Very little.
Still an
compared to other
impressive
movies.
number. We
Yeah.
still kudos to pulling that off and pulling it off with practical effects. But I think instead of saying no CGI, I feel like the proper terminology we could have used was it was used with practical effects.
Yeah.
Because there's always CGI, there's always visual effects. That is a facet of every single film now. And you're right, there were a ton of people that were behind this movie that kind of got paid dirt because of that marketing campaign. It was kind of sad to watch. I mean, one thing we did all enjoy though was, and I think why they won for best cinematography, was the cameras they shot on. And those were these crazy IMAX cameras. I mean, look at this. As a shoulder rig.
Yeah, and if you were to guess, if I might jump in, how many minutes do you think on that image they can record? Do you have a guess?
Very little.
What if I told you 3?
Minutes? That's crazy.
For a 1,000-foot roll of film in IMAX medium format, it's 3 minutes per reel.
Wow.
So they got to know what they're doing.
I mean,
That's
yeah,
pretty
and
intense.
They won Best Picture and Best Cinematography, so it shows. It definitely shows.
Yeah, imagine having to change an SD card every 3 minutes.
I would lose my mind. I really respect everybody that was on that set. You mentioned there was a special film stock made for these cameras.
Yeah, I
Tell
think
me a little bit.
that also plays a big role in why they won, is because this was the first time we saw black and white medium format film in any film, because it didn't exist. They make that for photographic film, like just shooting in a camera, but Christopher Nolan and Hoyte van Hoytema went to Kodak and specifically asked them to make this black and white film stock fit for IMAX format, which was an amazing result, I think. And it's just interesting because cinematographers, the way they light for black and white is different, because a lot of things can be forgivable, like harsh highlights on your face or using light without diffusing it just looks better in black and white. So I think for Hoytema, it allowed him a lot of creative opportunities to shoot something in a way that he doesn't normally get to shoot. So that was really cool to see. Really amazing.
We discussed a little bit earlier, but the big trend alert of at least this year has been intentional use of black and white within what is otherwise a color film. So I know I didn't see Dune 2 yet. No one, crucify me, but I've heard good things. I know that there was a black and white scene. Spoiler alert, I guess, if that counts. I don't know. Well, either way, we're going to spoil it right now. But they spent 4 months apparently on this scene that we're watching right now, where we see our main character, Paul Atreides,
Riding the Shai Halud. Other word, the worm.
the grandpa worm.
The grandpa worm.
Yes.
Not just any worm, he's riding the
Wormy.
grandpa worm.
Yeah, it took 4 months to shoot this scene. I think this scene was about 4 minutes in the movie. And a lot of people can kind of debate on whether it's worth it or not. I know when I was watching the movie, my jaw was on the floor. And literally, actually, I was watching this and I was just surprised and shocked on how amazing this scene looked. And it just felt like I was there, especially watching it in IMAX. I felt like I was riding the Shai.
You were on the worm.
He was literally on the worm.
I was on the worm. I was riding the worm.
Yeah, I mean,
That's an insane amount of time to spend for just 4 minutes of a scene. Like,
I'm in that same school of thought.
Yeah.
A month per minute of edited film, just the opportunity cost and labor cost of that makes me anxious. And I know that probably makes me sound like less of an artiste, but I have to be concerned. That is a crazy investment. In the end, do you guys think it was worth it? Yay or nay?
it was a pretty amazing scene, honestly.
It was amazing, and I want to say it was worth it because definitely that scene was a turning point in the whole movie. And I feel like that movie in general was just so grand and huge. And that scene, probably the biggest scene in the movie, it definitely had to be in there, for sure.
I mean, that was a defining moment
Yeah,
for that character.
for sure.
So it makes sense to spend 4 months of resources to film probably one of the most important scenes of the movie.
Right.
You know, like that's also part of a cinematographer's role, is they're in charge of how expensive shooting something will be, and that's part of the conversation, is what resources do we want to put a lot of time and energy into, and what resources will lack, or do we not have the energy and output to do? And the really important ones get the most resources and time. So obviously the filmmakers thought this was a really important part of the movie.
Right. I think it's, I mean, I Googled a synopsis because I don't think I'm ever going to have 3 hours to watch the first movie and then another 3 hours to watch the second movie. But
Just take some PTO.
I'll take some PTO. I'll get to it. Full 8-hour day. I'll bill you guys, I guess.
Sorry, David.
But it just seems like it's not just a turning point for the character. It's really like when the story arc shifts and we see him kind of become this Messiah-esque figure for not just his people, but a larger planet.
Definitely.
So overall, cinematography-wise, what was the vibe with Dune 2? Or the Dune, I thought it was supposed to be a trilogy.
It is. I think he's waiting on confirmation, but I think the movie's doing so well that confirmation's already there. I'm going to go first on here because I know Evan has an opposing opinion. I thought the cinematography was fantastic. Now, I know Evan's going to bring up Blade Runner, and I also agree that Blade Runner was a fantastic world, and I will agree that the world building in Blade Runner is just amazing. Every scene in that movie just feels like they have that freedom of creating whatever world, and I feel like Denis he did a successful job in Blade Runner, but with Dune I just felt like every shot just felt so, like, I don't know, it was a very balanced and composed movie in my opinion, and I think every shot was just super clean and maybe not super creative in like the rest of his kind of what's the movie for? It's not discography, it's filmography.
Well, yes.
Yeah. Compared to his rest of his filmography, I think it doesn't really stand up to Blade Runner, but I do believe that the cinematography was beautiful in this movie.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because that's kind of the whole reason why he went into the sci-fi genre was this was his childhood dream, to make Dune. And, you know, he made Arrival, he made Blade Runner kind of to prep himself to make and be able to tell such a grand story. And I mean, I love Dune. I saw it this weekend. I thought it was amazing. I had an incredible time watching it, but I was a little underwhelmed. I think this film very much needed to be grounded in realism, and in order to achieve that, they used a lot of documentary style approaches to camera movement and camera effects, and there were a lot of rack focuses. I don't know if you picked up on that.
I did.
And it's, I mean, no shade to Greg Fraser. He's an amazing cinematographer, but, you know, I think that's the kind of language that I'm personally used to shooting myself. So it felt very familiar in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Blade Runner. It was shot by Roger Deakins, which Dune
That's
was
your
shot.
man.
Yeah, that's my guy. He's my favorite cinematographer. Dune was shot by Greg Fraser, which is the same cinematographer who shot The Batman, which another amazing movie.
Yes.
But I don't know. I think Roger Deakins' approach to kind of just using light and really respecting light and kind of just not creating anything that doesn't feel grounded in the story that they're trying to tell, and his use of natural and interesting lighting and just these unreal scale of his sets and how he decides to light them is just like so inspiring as a young cinematographer. And no shade to Greg Fraser, but I think it's just, you know, like that's the visual language that we're used to shooting. So I'm more
Right.
drawn to kind of like things that extend a little bit beyond
Otherworldly.
that. Yeah, otherworldly.
I mean-
and it makes sense because Dune had to feel real. You know, like it had to feel
Right.
like something that we could exist in. And I don't know if any of you have seen David Lynch's adaptation of Dune.
I have not.
I saw a little YouTube synopsis.
Yeah.
It's
But-
you know, it's 1980s. You kind of have to like understand when it came out, and you can't really
sure.
compare it to nowadays. You know, I was speaking to one of our fellow coworkers, Karina, and I was kind of dogging down the 1984 version, and Karina kind of stood up and told me, "Hey, back then that was amazing. And that scene riding in the worm in 1984 was actually fantastic." So you know, I have to understand where my age. I kind of aged myself in that scenario.
But
it's fine.
it's interesting because I think the newer one feels way more grounded in like existing in a real world. The
Yeah.
other one felt very much like a film set,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
for sure.
You
Felt
know,
like it was
so-
trying to copy a galaxy far, far away.
There you go.
Which is also another accusation that is befalling Dune, is that it's just going to be this generation's kind of Star Wars, and we're going
Yeah.
to watch this trilogy. There's plenty of source material. I think there are like 7 or 9 books, or
The six books created by the actual author, Frank
Frank.
Frank something. And then
Good old Frank.
And
yeah.
then his son decided to make another 18 books to continue the lore. And I heard that a lot of people didn't really enjoy them. So I'm going to stick to the 6 books.
Yeah.
I don't think I need
Have
to
you
read.
started reading yet?
No.
When are you
not.
started?
I'm going to start soon. The thing is, nowadays with TikTok, I kind of spoiled myself with all these books. I kind of already know what happens at the end of the 6th book. So we'll see if I get there or not. Maybe I'll listen to an audiobook. I heard the audiobook has music in it too. So
That's totally up your alley.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, any way you slice it, whether it is the book or the movie, Dune is an impressive feat in world building, point blank.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
But listen, I think the female version of Dune this year was Barbie, okay? I think the world building in Barbie was one for the ages and one that will be in film textbooks. Specifically, look at this use of practical effects. It is to die for. It is so old cinema, and it is so like unbelievably cool to watch on screen. I mean, I loved this sequence, and I think I've watched this behind the scenes clip like a not normal amount of times. But in my opinion, this is how you world build and use the kind of limitation of being on a soundstage to your advantage. You kind of lean into the kitschiness of it. I just think this was done so right. And the visual language of this film, of course, you have the IP of Barbie is iconic and really well defined. You can do a lot with it. So I think they were able to have a really fun time in terms of creating a visual language and creating Barbie Land.
Yeah. And it felt like a world that you wanted to jump into.
Absolutely.
You know, like it didn't feel real by any means, but it felt like something so unique and original, and it was just so refreshing to kind of like just see all those colors and like see everything come together. And it felt like playing with little toys as a kid, but they're real people and they're just actors, you know. And one thing that I thought was interesting was the intentional decision with all of their exterior scenes to have this like perfect, beautiful rim light. And it's kind of just to show that the sun is perfectly, you know, for every character, the sun will always be in the perfect place. And even though it doesn't technically make any real sense, I thought that was a funny decision that, you know, they just leaned into it. And instead of kind of like ignoring the kitschiness of it, they just went full throttle. And
I feel like that's the thing with cinematography. You can choose and decide when to implement that forced look.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like with that forced plastic look, obviously this is coming from Barbie being in a fantastic plastic world or whatever.
Or whatever.
I think that decision to have that fake plastic look really comes into handy here.
Yeah.
When in other words, like in other scenarios, you just watched Avatar, and in a show where they're trying to make it seem believable and real, and the lighting that they chose in some scenes felt very fake and plasticky, doesn't really fit, you know?
Yeah.
So with this whole Barbie thing, it's kind of like, no, they wanted to go with that look.
Yeah.
And that's why you feel like there's toys here and you want to be in that toy world.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of the whole point of cinematography, is
Yeah.
it's supposed to enhance the intention of the story. And the story and the way that they choose to film it are supposed to merge into one. And if there's tension between that, I feel like it's very noticeable as a viewer.
Right.
You know?
So I want to talk about one movie this year that, in my opinion, blew me away in terms of cinematography. And the more we look into it, the more we are like jaws on the floor with the entire thing. And that is Poor Things. Another trend alert of intentional black and white use, amazing, crazy fisheye shots, crazy lenses, and all of the wonky camera work really speaks to that this is a surreal Dali-esque world that these characters are living in. And it separates us from the reality in which we think none of what's happening could be possible. You know, I mean, this scene is unbelievable, definitely a major moment in the film. But it's the camera work within the scene that, Evan, please share some insight on.
I think Yorgos and just his approach to filmmaking is one of the most refreshing I've seen in contemporary cinema. It's incredible just watching his films and being immersed in a style of storytelling that I've never seen before. And it's just like, you know, this was a film that was adapted from a surreal short story, and the way that they decided to narrow the visual language was they had these crazy fisheyes, they had these super intense zooms, these super wide angle shots that every scene they filmed, they wanted to use all of those lenses. And it was kind of a way to get them into that headspace of like, what does being in a surreal world feel like? You know, and through the perspective of the main character, like how would she view the world? She wouldn't just view it in normal, perfectly framed shots that are just repetitive. Like the pacing, the way that they insert those super wides and then cut to like a zoom in shot or a zoom out shot, like it's constantly moving. And I thought, I'd never seen movies like that, and I kind of want to see more movies like that. So I loved it. It was incredible.
Yeah, and I was looking into where they were shooting this. A lot of it was in Hungary, apparently, and a lot of it was at a studio, which, I mean, some of it was done on different locations, but a lot of it was at a studio. And I know from Yorgos's previous work, that's not something he's used to. And you've told me before that he came up in these smaller budget films.
It's funny because this is the first film, his first feature, that he uses artificial lighting, which is insane. Like imagine going to a shoot and not being able to use any lights. And that was his preferred way of working. So I don't know if any of you have seen The Favor, you should definitely go watch it, but that entire movie was shot only using natural sunlight. They didn't even have any modifiers, they didn't have any extra lights. All they did was they coordinated the production schedule around when the sunlight was gonna hit perfectly through these windows that they had. And it's interesting because again, that's the story he's trying to tell. Like it takes place in the 1800s, and guess what? Lights didn't exist in the 1800s.
There's
So-
no Matthew Stands in the 1800s.
No Forza.
And I appreciate that kind of intention of fully immersing the production in the world that it is existing in. You know, like that adds something more to the film that maybe the general viewer wouldn't notice, but I think it's something that feels very intentional and feels very, what's the word I'm trying to find? Like feels very authentic to the story. Yeah.
Move it along.
One thing I want to say about Poor Things, I haven't seen the movie, so bear with me. But after seeing some of the clips we've had here on the podcast, I almost feel like the camera felt like a character in its own way. you know?
Definitely.
And like I just saw a weird shot there. I don't know if David wants to pull it up. There was a shot. It looked like it was shot through like a little hole.
Yeah.
Like a black whatever, a hole. And it just feels like the camera is kind of like moving around in this world as well. You know, it's kind of moving around. Yeah, like look at this shot here. I've never seen
so
that.
the way they achieved this shot was they took a lens designed for a super 16 millimeter sensor and put it on a sensor that was way bigger.
Yeah.
So you have this
You see
vignette
the actual lens there.
Yeah, and it's something that anyone else in any other context of any other story wouldn't feel right.
Yeah.
But in the context of this surreal story that he's trying to tell, it matches perfectly.
It's weird, it's funky, you know,
Yeah.
and like that's the whole, like Emma Stone's character looks super weird. Mark Ruffalo's character looks super weird. I saw Willem Dafoe's character in this, super weird. So I feel like the camera being weird and having these weird angles is literally a part of the whole movie.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, 100%. And that's kind of what the role of a cinematographer is almost putting himself in the character of the camera, which in itself is its own character.
Cinematographer's like, yo, how do I make this weird, bro? And he did it. And
did it.
Obviously, Emma Stone winning the Oscar, like, I'm going to say now, I really want to watch the movie. I want to see her performance in this. Because I know she won her first Oscar with La La Land, right?
Yeah.
So, and then winning Best Actress again for
The
this.
longest
Like,
podcast ever.
Very well
Emma Stone's
deserved.
putting it on the floor, and I want to
Yeah.
see what's up.
Yeah, she killed this role. And
Definitely.
I think it's really easy to say that cinematography is for big budget, huge films only. And I think that's a very dangerous mindset that a lot of people can get trapped in. But I think as long as you have a camera, you can make a lot of really meaningful, beautiful stuff. So I want to reflect on a few clutch moments that we have had here. Some major wins in our cinematic department. I mean, there is no official cinematographer here, but Evan is definitely our guy. He is our resident cinematographer, and I want you to break down your process through a few of these really special shoots. So,
Yeah, well, I think the time that I've been here at Clutch, the one thing that I really wanted to learn more was lighting. And I've taken a lot of our shoots as an opportunity to kind of practice different lighting. And you see right now, this is our lighting setup for the DCC, which was a super fun shoot. I had this idea, I saw it on TikTok, where they were using a projector screen with RGB lights. And it was an idea that I had months ago, like 5 months before the shoot. But, you know, we had a vision, we executed the vision. And what's really cool about this is we tested it in our studio. You know, we made sure that it worked and it was exactly the way we wanted it in studio first, and then we translated that on set, on location at Hard Rock Stadium, which that was super cool. That was a really cool process, and I think it kind of just goes to show like what we're capable of, you know? Another really interesting project that we did was CI Care. That was a cool example of approaching a narrative story through the perspective of health and medicine, and that was really one of our only shoots where we actually shot it, you know, in the style of a narrative, where we had our wide coverage, then we would go into tights. And for those who don't know, like when you shoot a movie, you always shoot on your wides because it requires the least amount of lights. And then once you jump into your close-ups, it allows you the flexibility to kind of shape the light a little bit more. So anytime you see a movie, just know that they shot the wides first, the close-ups after, and it was just fun. I think we learned a lot. I was rocking the easy rig that whole shoot, and it felt good.
Yeah.
We felt in sync, right?
It was definitely one of our finest moments. It felt like we were making a short film a lot of the time, which honestly we kind of were. I think the final spot was around 10 minutes, which is crazy. And it was really a fully involved production. It is so rare that you have every single member of this team on a single shoot.
Yeah.
Doing a job that is absolutely 1,000% necessary. We had you shooting, Chris was pulling focus on stuff, which I love when you two get to work together and do that. I know it takes definitely a major stressor off of you, and it gives Chris like the ability to like give some insightful input, and the end product really speaks for itself. It is beautifully lit. I think some of the best footage we've done. I know you are also a huge fan of the ILS shoot we did.
Yeah.
This I think is our best looking footage, period.
Yeah, that was a great shoot, honestly. That was one where we really wanted to kind of push the barriers of the way that we light. And what we did was we lit a lot through windows, which is something we don't really get the opportunity to do because most of the time we're shooting on 5th, 6th floors of buildings, and
right.
you know, we just don't have the capability to put a light outside the window. But I think it allowed us the opportunity to do like really cool camera movement too. We used a lot of slider shots, and it was just fun. I felt like this was a very intentional shoot. We had a game plan, we had a lighting plan. I
This
think
was
it really,
where we put the light through the window. I mean, that looks unbelievably.
Yeah, we created our own sun, which is always cool. You know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's kind of what cinematography is all about, is just allowing yourself to kind of have fun and be creative and try different techniques, you know, so it's not every shoot feels the same. And this was one that I think it was another one where the whole team was there, wasn't it?
Yes, this was another one.
Yeah.
It's kind of trend alert, team clutch slaying a shoot.
It's almost like our best shoots is when the whole team's around, right?
Weird.
Hey, David.
There we go.
We cannot hear you, though.
All right. Well, I'm just going to say, oh, that's right. You guys can't hear either.
Yes,
How about
yes,
now?
of course.
Can you
Yep,
hear
Yes.
we can hear you.
All right. So I wanted to say, if people could see what those rooms look like, it's a totally different experience, right? It's like,
Definitely.
they don't look like that. And that, obviously, it's cleaning up the scene a little bit and framing, but the lighting kind of took over a lot of that, too. And the way the movements are, I really liked how it all came together. It really wasn't. Brad, not again. What did I tell you about? Anyway, I thought it was a great shoot, but like people could see the behind the scenes on that.
Yeah.
They would see that it was not what ended up being there, and I think that's part of the art, right? Turning something that
Yeah.
doesn't look so great into something pretty remarkable. And I know people will look at it, yeah, it looks fine, but the behind the scenes. Anyway, back
I
to you
think
guys.
the biggest,
Sorry to interrupt. Bye.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Don't worry, David. I'll allow it.
That That shoot was definitely an uphill battle. We were working with some overhead lighting.
Yeah, and I
which,
think, and that,
is
that
never the kindest to us. Let's
No.
leave it at that.
No, and I think that's exactly what David was saying. Like that's another role of the cinematographer is to pull up to a location and make it look the best it can.
That's
And
like probably the
sometimes-
biggest part of our job.
Absolutely.
Making something that doesn't look good look good.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of skill and practice and techniques, but that's the fun of it. It's kind of like a puzzle each time, you know? It's like you show up, you don't really know what to expect, and you have a plan, but then you show up and the plan changes. And when you have a team that just is so in sync like us, and we're able to achieve things that really make locations look as best as they can, I think the client ends up super happy with that, you know, because they couldn't even envision a space in a way that we kind of shaped it to be.
There are a lot of moments where I will pull our client over and be like, I know what we're doing looks not that exciting, but you need to look at the footage. And I will show them a monitor and they will like, you know, and it's those moments make me very happy because of course it's like, yes, they love what they're getting and that's the goal at the end of the day. But it's also like, I love being able to show people like, yeah, you gave us this thing and you might think it's going to look like this, but look how beautiful it is going to look.
I think the biggest part of your job specifically is more letting the client know, like, this might, it looks all hectic right now, and they're only seeing us kind of just in the middle of the field, but it's your job to kind of let them know, like, hey, we got this covered, and it's gonna look like this.
Yeah.
You know, and like as a producer, you kind of have to have that people skill to really let them know, and being able to communicate that efficiently to them is key, you know, and I feel like you have that skill for sure.
Well, listen, kid, I couldn't do without you two making it look pretty. At the end of the day, what Team Clutch does best is turn nothing into something. That is definitely in
New motto, David. New motto.
in our wheelhouse. Yeah, you two are excellent at what you do, and it has been an honor to show our clients the footage that you two create. So thank you guys for joining us on another episode. We will hopefully see you so very soon. And until then, have a great night, kid.
Cheers.
This was fun.
It was really fun, actually.
Yeah.
Was it?
It went very smooth.
Okay, well, we're about to do it all over.
Clutchcast.